welcome to CPA Australia's live webinar. Presenting today, we are joined by Jack Blaney. I'm also now going to just hand you over to today's moderator, or the chair, Gavin Ord. Gavin, I'm just opening up your mic there. Good afternoon.
Hello, Linda, and hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar. Today's webinar is a sponsored webinar by ReceiptBank, and it's titled An Automated Accounting Firm, a How-To Guide. Today, Jack Blaney, Account Development Manager from ReceiptBank, will be presenting on an automated accounting firm. Jack and his team work closely with existing ReceiptBank accountants and bookkeepers to ensure their ongoing success. I encourage everyone to ask questions as they go along, and Jack will endeavour to answer those questions in this webinar. So I now pass over to Jack to begin the webinar.
Thank you very much, Gavin. Thanks for joining us, everyone, today, and thank you to CPA for allowing ReceiptBank and myself to jump on and share this with you today. So as mentioned there, what I'll be talking through is around how to start to think about creating an automated accounting firm. It's certainly not an exhaustive guide, but hopefully it gives you a few simple steps that can kick off the process and just get you thinking about how to automate a few bits and pieces throughout your firm. As mentioned there, my name's Jack. I look after a team here at ReceiptBank of account development consultants. So ultimately, we look after existing partners of ReceiptBank, so accounting firms, bookkeeping firms that use us, and we help to ensure they get the most out of the software and also ensure that they're hopefully achieving their business goals. So we are an accounting automation tool, so this topic is very close to my heart, so I'm excited to run you through it today. So with presentations like these, we always like to start off with our ReceiptBank mission. So our mission is to power advisors to give every small business the time and confidence to succeed. The key part I want you to take away there today is that ReceiptBank is entirely geared around powering advisors, so powering you. We work specifically with accounting and bookkeeping firms, and we hope to be a mechanism that allows you to better service your clients and ultimately better achieve your business goals, but also to help you become better advisors and help you to deliver on the services that you promise to your clients. At a high level, ReceiptBank exists to help you as a firm and to help your clients get rid of manual data entry and to help you go paperless. Both of these things are massive bugbears in the industry, as I'm sure you know, but day in, day out, these are the problems that we try and solve for our accounting and bookkeeping partners and try to enable you to help solve for your clients. A little bit of background on ReceiptBank. So we were established in 2010 out of London. Since that time, we've grown to service around 50,000 individual accountants and bookkeepers globally, with around 13,500 of those just in Australia. And via those accounting partners, we service a little bit over 300,000 SMEs, so they're your clients. Via ReceiptBank, we transact around 10 million items per month, so invoices, receipts, bank statements, so a huge volume. And you'll see down the bottom there that we're pretty well renowned across the industry and across different markets globally as well. So again, ReceiptBank ultimately exists to do away with data entry. We always find that data entry is time consuming, it's riddled with human error, and for a very long time it was viewed as a necessary evil. ReceiptBank exists to try and remove this so that you as an accounting firm have real-time data at your fingertips and you don't have to go through the laborious path of inputting that data to get it. So more specifically, ReceiptBank does 4 jobs for you. First and foremost, we allow you to collect the important bookkeeping or accounting data that you need from your clients. So again, think receipts, invoices, bank statements, sales invoices, remittance advisors. We get them all from your clients really quickly and easily via a mobile app or via an email in. We will then run all that information through our world-class data extraction. We extract all the important bits of data that you need from that documentation. We will then publish that over to your accounting software, and we'll store all that information securely in the cloud online for you, so it's accessible at any time. To play that out a little bit further, you can see here that we will put in the hands of your clients a really simple mobile app. They go and buy a coffee, for example. They can snap a photo of that coffee receipt through our mobile app. That will then send directly up into the cloud. We will extract all the information off of that coffee receipt automatically, and we'll then send that information over into your accounting software so it can be reconciled really quickly. And again, you then have that information stored in the cloud, and you have that information in real time, so then you can go forward and do the services that your clients are expecting from you without all that manual data entry that needs to precede it. So enough about us. What we're here to talk about today is how to build an automated accounting firm. And the session today are going to be split into three main sections. So first and foremost is how to identify key areas to automate, how to then identify the apps that can help you to do that, and then how can we develop a rollout plan for your firm internally to help you to actually roll out the technology or the change that you're looking to roll out. Before I jump into that, there's just a quick question that came through. So the question was, where is your data storage located? So our data storage is via Amazon Web Services. So it's a similar setup to the likes of Xero or a lot of the big banks. Our data centers are located in the UK. So they're geo-redundant, there's two of them, so if one goes down, the other one picks it up. But the data is based out of the UK, which is where we were founded. So step one, how to identify key areas in your firm that are prime for automation. We recommend to start really simple, really high level. So write down a list of the processes that exist in your firm. This will help you just kind of wrap your arms around what's happening in your practice, what are the processes that you and your team go through day to day, and therefore, where is a good place to start? So it might be invoicing clients, it might be bank reconciliation, booking, tracking projects, exchanging files, whatever it may be, there's certainly things that happen in your firm day to day. So the first step is just to write them down, just to see what we're working with. Number two is then to start to think about where are the communication gaps. So within these processes, where do things fall down a little bit? So it may be in the exchange of information between team members. It may be exchange of information between your team and the client. It may even be exchange of information between the processes or the tools that you use themselves. But wherever those processes are falling down and wherever there's gaps are often really good places to look for automation. This is a step towards identifying the bottlenecks. So once you've identified the gaps, it will help you kind of think about why do those gaps exist and what are the bottlenecks that are causing those gaps. So for example, it might be waiting for clients to send information over. This is a big one we often hear. It might be creating proposals for clients and actually getting a relationship kicked off, reviewing timesheets, status checking, reconciliation, whatever it may be. By identifying the gaps, you can then identify the bottlenecks. And once we know the bottlenecks, we can start thinking about how we can solve them. And often a really good way to solve them and start to automate is by thinking about apps. So anyone who's been along to a XeroCon or a QuickBooks Connect will know that there's a ton of apps in the space. There is an app for every specific little process that you can think of, which is a really good thing, but it also can be quite overwhelming to start with. So what we've done in this next portion here it's just giving you a little place to start around identifying apps that you can start to use in your firm. So there's a few examples here, ourselves included, of course, that we consider kind of best in breed. And these are probably more of the prominent ones that we find in the space. But my general rule of thumb with technology is to avoid plugging in technology just for technology's sake. My advice would be to have a think about what's the firm you want to run, what are the services you want to offer, what is the bottleneck that you're trying to solve, and work back from there, as opposed to doing it the other way around, because you can get overwhelmed, or you can just bring on too many things and it's impossible to actually manage those effectively. Try and keep it simple, tackle the big problems first, and implement apps that are going to serve your practice rather than trying to shape your practice around the apps that exist. Once you've come up with the bottleneck or the area of the business that you're looking to automate, we can start to think about what that will actually look like practically in terms of rolling it out throughout the practice. Number one, it's simple, but it's really important, is leadership buy-in. And I'd probably extend this even further to say stakeholder buy-in. The biggest issue we see when firms come on board with ReceiptBank day one is that not everyone has bought in, or not everyone is aware of the change, and therefore it actually comes back to individuals within the firm acting as barriers themselves as opposed to the technology. So I think before any change happens in a firm, you need buy-in from the key stakeholders that are going to be involved, because ultimately it's people that make things happen, not the technology itself. From there, you can start to evaluate and select the changes or the technologies that you want to implement. So I mentioned a few conferences before, simple online research, user partner interviews, going through other apps that are integrated with things you're already using. But ultimately, I think it comes back to what I said earlier around thinking about the problem you're solving, researching around that, and making sure the app is actually feeding in to that particular problem that you're trying to solve. From there, you can start to test. So first and foremost, is this something that's going to work within your team or for the individual that's implementing the change? What kind of time periods is it going to take to actually implement? Do you have sufficient data to actually test this in a real-world environment? Is it documented? Do you know what change is coming? And then finally, just evaluating and making a decision. Once we've made that decision, the fun part starts, and we can actually start to implement through the firm. So I always put a really big emphasis on the who, what, and the when implementing something. And this is a huge priority for ReceiptBank as well. So we actually have a team here called the Partner Success Team, who exists purely to help firms implement ReceiptBank. So we invest a whole lot of money because we know implementing is so key to success, and if it falls down, it's just not going to work moving forward. And I think with any change or implementation that you're going through within your practice, having that same mentality is important. So again, think about who needs to be involved. Are they aware? Are they bought in? And are they trained to sufficiently roll this out? What are you actually looking to achieve by rolling it out? And be specific. Set KPIs around what does success actually look like off the back of this change that we're making. And also when. Define timeframes, because so easily with these things, it can be put on the back burner and it can blow out further and further, and suddenly you're not seeing an ROI on something that you've implemented for months or even years down the track. So be strict with what you want to achieve and be strict with when you want to achieve it. From there, it's just a matter of continuous improvement. You've set yourself goals, you've set yourself KPIs, and you know what you want to achieve. So then it's just constantly running back at those milestones, the who, what, and the when. is this person or are these people still the right people to be looking after this process? Are they still trained up? Have we still got momentum going? Have we hit those KPIs that we set out? If not, why not? How do we fix that? How do we bridge that gap? And finally, are we hitting them in the timeframes we set out? Were those timeframes realistic? If we've missed them, why have we missed them, and how do we make sure we hit the next one? From there, it's a matter of running that process again with a different area of the business to focus on. And this is how you start to chip away at the automation piece that we've been talking about. This is how you start to layer automated processes on other automated processes. And over time, you will continue to remove those bottlenecks from the business, and you'll start to actually build more and more of an automated firm as you go along. Now, I noticed Michelle just posted in the chat there, if you are interested in being contacted by ReceiptBank off the back of today, you had my email at the top there, which is just jack@receiptbank.com. You can also post as Michelle recommended there. What we typically do with firms like yourselves is get you established on what we call the ReceiptBank Partner Program. So you'll have access to our software, of course. You'll be onboarded, like I mentioned earlier. You have a dedicated account manager, and you'll also have access to a ReceiptBank dashboard, which means you can then start to implement this with your clients and bring them on board as you go. You can also jump on there through our website, which is receiptbank.com, and specifically if you're looking to get up and running, /new plans. You'll see there as well that we're really highly rated across the different app stores, both on Android and iPhone as well. So thank you very much. I'll open that up to questions if you want to put some in the chat box too.
Thanks, Jack. I think I might start with a few questions to Gavin Ord here. How do you see automation impacting the jobs or roles of accountants, not just accountants in practice, but also accountants working for business as well?
Good question. So it's a difficult one to answer super specifically because it really depends on the exact task that you're doing. So often we come across, if we're speaking to bookkeepers specifically, or people who are doing data entry, like, is this going to remove my job or is this going to remove it entirely? I don't think so. I don't think compliance and I don't think the human element of this is ever going to completely die. What we see as the role of ReceiptBank is shifting people from doing the grunt work and the data entry to becoming more custodians of the data. So ultimately what we're trying to do is give accountants the data in as close to real time as possible for them to then do what they want with that data. So ultimately it depends on the kind of services and the kind of firm that you're wanting to run. But we want it to be a non-issue of having that data and having it in a compliant way so that those firms can focus on what actually matters, which is ultimately growing the practice and or servicing their clients in a more effective way.
And how do you see, from your experience, implementing ReceiptBank? What would you say is the best practice in terms of implementation, in terms of preparing so the grunt work bookkeepers and accountants, how do they best prepare those for a different sort of role?
So do you mean how do they best kind of implement ReceiptBank itself within the practice, or how do they prepare for just a general change?
I think how do they prepare their staff for just a general change? Do they just implement it, or do they provide them training so they can do more of the value-added work? What do you see as the best approach?
Yeah, good question. I think it comes back, I'll try and find the slide again. It comes back to this. So I think springing something on people is never a good way. and I find this managing a team just here. People need to understand the why behind a change so they actually buy into it. Nobody likes change just for change's sake. So I think there needs to be a really clear understanding within the firm of why the change is happening, and again, what are the goals of actually making that change. And then that needs to be communicated effectively to all the stakeholders before anything actually starts to happen. I think the second part of that there is then making sure they're fully equipped to not just do the change, but actually embrace it. People will always be happy to make a change if they don't feel like they're overwhelmed by it. So making sure they're equipped with sufficient training, making sure the vision and the steps that they need to go through are really clearly set before anything even starts. And we see this implementing ReceiptBank too. People who get swept up and really excited and sign up after a 10-minute demo will often then not be as successful as those who have kind of thought it out and actually planned on how this will work moving forward. So I think making sure everyone who is going to be involved is completely across the reason behind the change, and then making sure that the plan for how to implement it is clearly laid out as well.
Thank you for that. I want to ask a few more questions before we get to some of the member queries. What processes do you believe are best suited for automation? Can anything be automated, or do you think there are some processes that are better suited to automation than others?
Good question. So I think not every process can be automated, because I think the beauty in what we do is in the intellectual property that we all have as individuals. So I don't think that you'll ever be able to automate something like really good advisory, or, you know, from my side, a really good salesperson. What I think is a really good area that's ripe for automation is where things are repeated. So things are just done over and over again, and also that the inputs are kind of repetitive as well. So something where you've got a constant flow of information coming through. So in our case, it would be invoices or receipts, and then a process that's then repeated off the back of it. So something like reconciliation or data entry. So you've got the same sort of things coming in, and then you've got the same activities happening off the back of that, and anything where that's happening is really prime for automation. So I'll use an example internally. We found ourselves sending basically the same follow-up emails off the back of calls that we have. So what we started to look at doing is automating through a plug-in to our Gmail responses to emails. So rather than typing from scratch the exact same email every time, we can actually automate the creation of a template, which we can then tweak based off the back of the call. So it's not completely removing us from the process, but we will put inputting the same thing and doing the same activities, so we can start to think about automating that.
I'd like to go back to, I think, step one is how to identify key areas to automate. Where it says, I think you're scrolling back to that now. But yeah, just like you said, go through and look at those sort of repetitive tasks. Write those down as things you might wish to consider to automate.
This one here?
Yes, that's the one, yeah.
Yeah.
Another question is, often when people talk about the benefits of automation, it's around the cost reduction and the greater speed and efficiency. Do you see other benefits to automation outside of those sort of more core ones? Yeah,
I do. I think they're the inputs, I suppose, as opposed to the outputs. So yeah, of course, you know, time saving and or cost saving is always going to be the primary first benefit, I suppose. But then ultimately, it's what do you do with that? So a lot of the benefits we see from automation are then reflected in the client experience or the quality of the service that's being offered, because no longer are accountants, for example, calling their clients to query what a particular item is. They're calling them to discuss their business or their data. It's taking away basically the annoying stuff and allowing them to focus on the things that the clients actually want to receive. So clients don't necessarily pay or see value in all the grunt work that goes on behind the scenes. They see value from the output. And by removing and automating that stuff in the back end, it allows you to focus on more of that client-facing stuff. The other thing we see as well that I think is an underrated one is just quality of life. So many partners of ours come to us who are working Saturdays and Sundays or till 9 o'clock at night just to get that grunt work done. And by removing that, they just can spend more time with their kids or spend more time on the golf course or whatever it may be.
In terms of the impetus for automating tasks, sometimes these things come from different areas of the organisation, like IT. Do you think, from your experience, the impetus for automating best comes from, like, for instance, the finance function or the sales function rather than the IT function? Should it be the IT function driving this, or should it be, you know, the finance function or the sales function?
In terms of automation broadly?
Yes.
I don't think it matters necessarily. I think everyone goes through processes day in, day out. So everyone's going to have an insight into the things that they do day to day that are repetitive and that are time sucks. So I don't think it necessarily matters who brings this sort of concept or these sort of projects to the table. What I do think is key, and it's down in step 1 down here, is that there's leadership buy-in. So it could be the most junior person in the organisation who identifies an area that's right for automation, but unless that's then kind of embraced and bought in by the leadership, then often it hits a brick wall. So yeah, I don't think there's any particular division or any particular individual within an organisation that should or shouldn't be thinking about this. But ultimately, there is decision makers within every practice that need to buy in for it to happen.
Thank you for that. What about once it's been implemented, automation's been implemented, what do you suggest are the best ways to monitor the success or otherwise of the automation?
I think it comes back to setting goals, KPIs, standards. If you're really clear with what a success looks like within the practice, what are you trying to achieve, then you know the baseline. You know what it should look like. And then it's about setting clear KPIs to maintain that. You know, I can give you an example of ReceiptBank specifically. We have what we call supplier rules. So if a invoice always comes in from Bunnings, you can set a rule that says that should always go to tools and supplies. So firms that we work with will have a standard that 50% of all suppliers need to have a rule like that. If it then dips below that 50%, they can then manage that and make sure people are jumping in and proactively setting those rules to maintain that minimal level of automation. And I think that goes for anything. Clear KPIs, clear expectations, and then it becomes easy to see if you're overachieving or underachieving those.
A lot of the people on this webinar are practitioners, and some of them might be thinking around how and they might be doing audit of their clients. So how would this impact the ability of people on this call to audit their client work? Is there any implications, and what would they be?
So we have a lot of firms who do audit through ReceiptBank. So ultimately, I saw a question in the chat, like, what does ReceiptBank actually do? So what we're doing is collecting accounts payable and accounts receivable documentation from your clients. So invoices, receipts, sales invoices, bank statements, things like that. We're then collecting all of that in the cloud, and we're pushing it over into your accounting software so you can reconcile it really quickly and have it all there ready to go and compliant. What we also have within ReceiptBank is what we call the archive. It's like an online filing cabinet. So everything that runs through the ReceiptBank and all the data that we extract is saved in there. So everything that's submitted by the client, everything you store for the client is completely searchable, completely downloadable. So we had a partner, one of their clients got audited, and they managed to get through the audit in like 45 minutes or something, because they just had all the information there ready to go, completely searchable and really easy. So we have other partners who just use us essentially as a storage tool. So they'll submit everything, rental statements, like signed contracts, everything into ReceiptBank. So really there's no limitation on how you should use ReceiptBank. All we're doing is getting that data, getting the information that you need and storing it in the cloud.
Thank you for that. We've got a few questions coming through. I might hand it over to you, Jack, to respond to those questions. I think the first one was from Rosemary. I think you responded to Rosemary's second question, but not the first question.
I did, yeah, not a problem. So the question was, is it possible to use just a few of your functions? It depends on what you mean by that. We have what we call ReceiptBank Streamline, which is our core functionality, our bread and butter. And that's our standard package. We also have an extension above that called ReceiptBank Optimize, which is where you get dashboard and metrics to actually use within your practice. To my point before, though, there's no right or wrong way to use ReceiptBank necessarily. Some firms will use this for all of our bells and whistles, where others will just use this as essentially like an online cloud storage function and everything in between. So it's really completely up to you how you use it, and really depending on the services, the clients, the practice that you run. The next question there is similar. So can ReceiptBank be linked with other apps or software so we can use limited functions of ReceiptBank? So yeah, we have integrations. Our main ones are naturally with the accounting softwares. So Xero Cash Books, QuickBooks Online, MYOB Essentials, MYOB AccountWrite Live. We also have some other integrations into different kind of auxiliary apps and things like that, depending on what you need. Yeah, it's probably a good question to follow up with you on. Let me just... How does the system pick up the important details from the receipt, or is it customized to the client? So the answer is a bit of both. So ReceiptBank uses what's called OCR. So basically that's the software in the background will automatically look through an item and detect the fields and extract them. So we will pull off every time the type. So if it's a receipt, an invoice, etc., the supplier, so who does it come from, the total, the tax, which is really important. So we'll extract the tax off the item rather than just applying it at 10%, because obviously there might be GST and GST-free components. We'll also pick up invoice number, and we can detect the payment method as well. So we'll pick them up every time. That's what the software does. But what you can also layer on top that I mentioned before are customized rules depending on the client. So for example, again, you might say Bunnings for this client goes to cost of goods, whereas Bunnings for this other client will go to tools. So a little bit of both, but the idea there is that we should be able to have that item arrive for you with all of that data ready to go.
And when there are problems reading the characters, is there an exception system which comes to somebody? Is that how it works?
Yes. So for items that are particularly difficult to read or that the software isn't 100% confident in, we have a human team that basically acts as like a safety net. So they will look at that and input the data. Absolute worst case scenario, if it's really, really blurry photo, if it's handwritten and we can't detect it or anything like that, it'll still come through. It'll just have those particular fields that we couldn't read, they will be missing. And you can manually input them if you like.
Thank you.
Perfect. The next question was just around the monthly fee for ReceiptBank, and just, I suppose, a comment on the fact that Siobhan's come on board with ReceiptBank but has not had the time to properly implement it at the moment, which is clearly a concern. So the monthly fee for ReceiptBank is dependent on a couple of things: the number of clients that you want to bring on to ReceiptBank, and also the size of your firm. So, naturally, we're not going to charge Deloitte the same as we would a sole practitioner. And of course, there's a different price if you wanted to bring on 25 clients as opposed to 100. The second part there is around the implementation. So what I'm going to do, Siobhan, is I've taken down your name, and I'm sure you've got a point of contact here, but I'll have them reach out to see if we can help. But I suppose it's a timely comment given what we've spoken about today, because the implementation is such a key component, and we do put a big emphasis on it. But we do see firms like yourselves who don't necessarily have the time or the resources internally, which is a concern. The next question there is, does it save as a PDF? And what types of accounting systems can it link to? So another question about accounting systems too. So just to reiterate, MYOB Account Live, MYOB Essentials, QuickBooks Online, QuickBooks Essentials as well. Is that what it's called? The basic one for QuickBooks, Simple Start, I believe. Xero and Xero Cash Books. So unfortunately, to Megan's question and Chun's question there, we don't integrate with SAP and we don't integrate with Microsoft Nav. What we can do with ReceiptBank is download the data as a CSV. So you could do a export-import into those particular softwares. And circling back to Heather's question there, we do save as a PDF. So you can choose to download as a CSV or download as a PDF. I think we've covered off most of the questions there. But thank you for the comment there, Georgina. Georgina's recently started using ReceiptBank, loving it, buy-in from the leadership team, which is great to hear. Very intuitive, saving time. And Georgina's using it with Xero as well, which is really good.
Just another thought I had is, does ReceiptBank have, does it provide any analytics as well, rather than just the automation? Does it also provide analytics?
Yeah, good question. So I touched on it a little bit there with ReceiptBank Optimize, which is kind of our full bells and whistles top package. You will get access to a dashboard. So that will start to provide analytics and metrics on how your clients are using it, how much data are they putting through, how long does it typically take for them to submit, how many items are sitting in there, like what's the work in progress at any given time. The other approach that we see firms take is to use the archive to actually run certain analytics. So you can isolate things in the inbox to say, okay, how many items came through from this particular supplier over this particular amount in this particular date range. So it's not analytics in the true sense, but you can use and manipulate the archive to isolate data sets and kind of figure stuff out from there as well.
We've got a question from Jason as well.
Yeah, perfect. So I'm going to assume that's like around line items. So the question there was, how does software handle invoices which require multiple GL account allocations? So there's a few different ways. Number one is we have just launched something called line item extraction. So when you submit an item, you can opt to have that particular supplier run through the line item extraction, and we'll actually extract those individual lines off the particular item. You can then assign them to individual codes. You can also do that manually. So if an item comes in and you know you want to split it out, you can actually jump in and split those out and assign the GLs. We can also create rules. So say, for example, a particular client's telco needs to go 40% to business and 60% to personal. You can create a rule that will automatically split their Vodafone invoice into those two components and automatically assign those particular general ledger codes. So it really depends on the client and the nature of the invoice, but yeah, there's a few different methods in which we do that, but we can do it.
Just a sort of final question, which is sort of a wrap up. And just sort of allows you to wrap up what you've said before. What would you say is your top tips and tracks for implementation of automation?
Yes. So I think number one is don't try and do it all at once. Figure out the exact process or the exact bottleneck you want to solve and focus in on that. Number two would be get stakeholder buy-in. Make sure everyone who is going to be implementing and experiencing the change is well across it, well trained, and has bought into the process before you begin. And number three would be have a plan. Think of the who, what, and when. Who's going to be involved? What are you actually looking to achieve? Set KPIs, set milestones, and when are you hoping to achieve those milestones by? It'll just help you keep on track and help you keep a clear eye on what you're actually doing it for.
Well, as there are no more questions, I'll hand back to Linda to close off today's webinar, which has been sponsored by ReceiptBank.
Okay, no problems. Thank you very, very much there to both Jack and Gavin for a fantastic webinar. Special thanks to everyone for your participation throughout today's webinar as well as your attendance today. That does formally conclude. So to exit, just click on the cross on the top right of your screen. Upon exiting, you'll be automatically redirected to a feedback form. Now the feedback form only takes about 30 seconds to complete. However, feedback's really beneficial for CPA Australia as well as our panel today as well, so please leave your thoughts. And that's right, Michelle's just popped in there saying that a copy of the presentation will also be sent to you. You can also access that via your login email. There'll be a little area that says supporting materials. All right, well, I just say a few thank yous there. So thank you once again to Jack and Gavin. And I'll pop on the music as you all exit. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. Thank you.
Thank you.